Honorable Arnolds.
Hi, Chairperson.
Hey, you disappeared yesterday. I looked for you.
Yeah, Chairperson, you can see now I've been struggling here with my my laptop here and the connection.
Yeah, no, I can see you are struggling with your network there.
Yeah, no.
You can only switch on your video when you disappeared yesterday. Maybe it will assist you.
Yeah, no, I'm taking this laptop now. It's something is not. It's not right here, but this is now. I'm using my tablet now.
Okay.
To connect, yeah. But yesterday it was a challenge. Yeah. I was still speaking.
Yeah.
So I did. My questions was addressed. What? Huh?
I said, but this one is disappearing in the ocean of Cape Town. I can't find him.
Yeah. And then when I was trying to reconnect again, and then Asghar said, "No, the meeting is closed now. It's done." I was struggling the whole time.
Yeah, the whole time, man.
But it went well yesterday.
Yeah, no, it went well. We said because you couldn't hear the responses, they will put them in writing. Then we'll forward to members. Yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Afternoon, honorable members.
Afternoon,
Hi, greetings.
Okay.
Greetings. You look beautiful.
Oh, thanks very much. I'm happy to see you guys on the situation that we are living now.
Yeah, no,
it's so good to see you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, hey. No, we are living on a difficult time.
We must just keep on praying, leadership. We must just keep on praying.
Yes. A lot. Only God knows. Yeah. No, it's fine, honorable members. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Chair.
Secretary, can you be checking with the department whether they have connected already?
Chair, I see the DG is here, and the Zaitun, the Parliamentary Liaison Officer, is also here. She's going to be projecting the presentation. I think we're just waiting for the Deputy Minister.
All right. Okay, because 3 o'clock exactly, we are starting.
Okay, Chair. We also have sufficient members to start, Chair, as well.
Okay. Yeah. Afternoon, Deputy Minister.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair. How are you?
I'm fine, and yourself?
Compliments.
Compliments to you too.
Sure.
You can give me the go-ahead, Secretary, to start.
Chair. Sorry, Chair, but you were gonna. Chair, we can start. We've got the officials and we've got sufficient members. We can start, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much.
Deputy Minister, hello, Pinky.
Hello, Ma'am Winnie. Compliments. How are you?
How are you, Malbongo?
Why do you look so young?
Hey, 2021 on Ratile Manes.
Okay.
No, it's staying indoors.
Yes, Chairperson, you are right. I'm disciplined.
I can't open my screen. What's it? I can't open my. I want you guys to see me, and I can't open it. I don't know why.
And I want to see you. It's a long time not seeing you.
Our select committee secretary must help me.
Please.
No, thank you very much, honorable members. I think it's almost 3 o'clock. We can start with our meeting. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the honorable members and say compliments of the new season. This is our first select committee of the year. And also want to welcome the Deputy Minister and her team. You are welcome, DM, together with your team from communication. We are meeting under very difficult situation. To the committee members, you might have seen that in our WhatsApp group, we are having an acting secretary who will be with us until our secretary recovers. She's hospitalized. And I think from our side as members of the committee, what we can do is to pray for her and a speedy recovery, together with all other people who are affected by COVID-19, and also to send our condolences to all those who passed on because of COVID. I think it will be important that we just have a moment of silence before we can start with our meeting. Can we have a moment of silence? Thank you very much, honorable members. We need to be praying. Before we started the meeting, we were speaking with each other here in terms of how COVID has affected almost everyone, either by a close relative or any other person that is close to you. Besides members of parliament, even the staff is also very much affected by COVID. So we hope that with the arrival of vaccines, we can minimize the impact of COVID to our people. Thank you very much, honorable members. You are all welcomed. I'll just request the secretary just to give us the apologies, if there are any apologies that has been received by office. Certainly.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, the only apology that we've received so far is from the Minister. It was indicated that she's attending a meeting with the President, so unfortunately she's not able to be at the meeting.
Okay. Do we have apologies from members? Because I see we are not all in here. I'll request members, if they have been given apologies by other members, to indicate.
Chairperson.
Honorable Arnold.
Thank you, Chairperson. Can I just send an apology of Commissar a member Macau says she is also ill health. Due to ill health, she can't attend the meeting.
Okay, it will be noted. Honorable Smith.
Chairperson also.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Honourable Labaskachni also won't be able to attend. She's busy with her other meeting.
Okay. Honourable Ngwenya.
Thanks to Chair. Chairperson, the apology is for Honourable Modise, that she's also sick. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Honorable Klute, you can mute your mic if you don't want to speak. Because
I wish to speak. I wish to speak, Chairperson.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. You have raised your hand.
Yes.
Honorable,
thank you.
Honorable. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to raise my concern on the fact that the Minister is not here. I mean, we're working with a white paper today, which is a very important policy South Africa needs to attend to. And well, thank you for the Deputy Minister for being here. But I mean, the Minister is ultimately the one responsible for this white paper, taking this to the Cabinet. So I wish to express concern about the fact that, again, the Minister is not here today.
Okay, thank you very much. Like you had the apology, because we tried to shift the time so that we can accommodate the Minister, but because of the appointment with the President, she could not be part of us. Thank you very much. DM, you are the one leading the delegation. You will make inputs and then I'm handing over to you and your team to take us through the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and compliments to all members, honorable members who are part of us. And of course, I share the same sentiments with you, Chair, in passing condolences to all our loved ones, extended families, and we hope that with the intervention of the leadership of the President in ensuring that the first dose or consignment of the vaccine will be able to really make the necessary interventions. Chair, the team that is with me is led by the acting DG, Menon Kumela. She will be presenting together with Colin Mashile and a number of them that deals with the ICT policy framework, integrated ICT framework. And I think this is an important piece of policy framework that will also assist us, not only as government, but also as South Africa, to respond to the connectivity, including the ICT elements that are required for all our citizenry to rise to the occasion and be able to respond to what COVID has also exposed us. Today, we're talking about remote learning. Today, we're talking about online meetings like this meeting that is taking place. But critical to this is the policy framework that will assist all of us in terms of universal access, but also ensuring that no corner of South Africa is left unconnected, whether through broadband, whether through ICT, our schools, all our public entities, whether hospitals, clinics, and whatever, but most importantly, households. Because today, if you look at how the schools are able to do remote learning, it is important for every household to be connected. And I think this policy framework also speaks to some of those things. And of course, members of the select committee will also guide us going forward. So I'll hand over, Chair, to the acting DG and her team to take the committee through on what we are presenting this afternoon. Thank you very much, Chair. But just to hasten, Chair, that if the meeting goes beyond 6:45, I have a meeting with Minister Lamola at 6 o'clock. So, but I hope the 2 hours will be able to be sufficient for us. Thank you, Chair.
A very good afternoon. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Good afternoon, Chair, to the honorable members. As the Deputy Minister has indicated, my name is Nomgobela Jordan Gyami, the Acting Director General. Chair, I would need to be guided by you. As you would see, our slides, there are quite a few. I'm not so sure how much time I do have in terms of presenting.
No, I think the slides are not that many. You can be able to present them. I checked them. They are around 38 slides, if I'm not mistaken, or 30-something slides.
32.
32 slides. Yeah, you can present. At least if you don't go beyond 4 o'clock, we'll still be fine. So that the other time I can allocate to members to engage with your presentation.
No, thank you, Chair. We'll then keep it for about 30 minutes. Much appreciated. Chair, I do, as the Deputy Minister indicated, the team from the department who are with us, and especially, Chair, present are the implementers of the various projects that we will talk about. The presentation outlines the 5 stages that we undertook in the development of the ICT policy, which was quite an extensive process. And then we will also talk then in terms of what is covered in the the ICT policy and what the integrated policy framework. We will also touch on in terms of what we are doing and what we intend on doing, Chair, as well. And that talks to the progress in the implementation. Next slide, please. So the process started in 2013 in as far as the framing which was then gazetted, and that then translated after we went on public consultation into the green paper, which was then gazetted in January 2014. After which we had a discussion paper. Again, there were extensive public consultations, which then resulted in the ICT review and the recommendations. And then we had the white paper. You would have noted that the main need was that the last time that we had a review or a development of a policy in the space was in 1994. So we needed to drastically update in the ever-changing environment, as the Deputy Minister had indicated. So the overarching framework looks at transformation of South Africa and ensuring that we build an inclusive knowledge and innovative digital economy. Our intent in terms of the interventions is to ensure that all South Africans, regardless of their status and where they are located, that they would actually then receive the socioeconomic and the services that the Deputy Minister spoke to. So the interventions in the main seek to promote universal service and access. They seek to look at building a digital society. The policy approaches address the issues related to the supply as well as the infrastructure rollout. The policy also then looks at how do we address the issues of the scarce resources, especially spectrum, and also how do we redress the postal sector and making it more relevant in the digital economy. And then it also looks to increase, how do we increase the participation and in the ICT industry, looking both in terms of the transformation of the sector and also ensuring that it's more inclusive, especially representing the demographics of our country. And then that also then meant that we had to look at the institutional frameworks and to see how then they would be more responsive in that environment. So the policy itself then looks at the supply measures. In this regard, we looked at the open access regime, and we looked at also the radio frequency spectrum policy, and it also then came with a rapid deployment policy and new licensing framework, as well as the internet, which then is the crust of the digital economy. And then on the demand side, there was the digital transformation of government, the digital access in order to promote trust and security in the use of ICTs, and digital inclusion in order to create an enabling environment, and also look at new service offerings and platforms such as e-commerce. With regards to the postal sector and the reform, as I indicated, that we needed to ensure that the postal sector is responsive and is also then fitting within the digital economy. That meant that we have to reposition the post office, identifying the new market and making it more competitive, and expanding certainly its roles and obligations, including that of the post bank. And then lastly, we were looking at the issues of the institutional framework in terms of the effective regulations across the ICT as well as the internet value chain. There is a proposal in terms of the consolidation of the regulator to which we are currently studying and making it more agile. And we looked at the issues that it has to be more responsive in stimulating competition. And the competition obviously will result in lower cost of services. And then we also had to look at the role of USASA and how then do we transform it that it actually looks at stimulating this digital sector. And therefore there was then the proposal in the transforming of USASA and USAF into a digital development fund. Next slide, please. So on the first, which the Deputy Minister had already alluded to, some of the challenges that we had picked up with various engagements is the fact that in a digital society, the universal access to communications is not just a tool, but we have to also address the inequalities across society, and also then address the preconditions to enable equality. There was also the challenges with regards to the duplications and the lack of alignment in the institutional frameworks. There was, as we know, in our country, we are facing huge digital divide, and these inequalities are certainly were also showing expression within the ICT sector, especially in ICT services, and especially, as you would know, in terms of access to the internet, especially those in rural and remote areas. And then there was also the overemphasis in regard to the subsidying of the network extension. So our principles, certainly that we said that we need to ensure that universal services and access ensure availability, affordability, accessibility to all, including digital access, creating awareness, and also improving on the quality of services. Our interventions were that certainly that we wanted to cement that the minister or the ministry remains responsible for policy formulation in this regard. We had to relook the regulatory functions of USASA and how to transfer those into the new sector regulator. We also looked in terms of how the current universal service and access would then evolve and also include more service obligations, and especially in the area of the broadband connectivity. And then we were looking at transforming USASA into a digital development fund in order then to support this. And also, I must also indicate here, members, that what we were also saying is that we've got a lot of the SMMEs who are probably coming up with solutions and innovation. And how then do we promote those people within the ecosystem? And therefore, the Digital Development Fund is going to assist that it's not just looking in terms of the mainstream sector players. So what we are currently busy with is that we have done a scope on the Digital Development Fund. We've engaged National Treasury and DBSA as well as other key departments to then see an ideal institutional framework. We've included the issues in terms of how do we close the digital divide, but also, as I said, at the same time, how do we ensure and stimulate innovation and growing the sector? And then also in this regard, an electronic communications amendment bill is currently being developed for this purpose as well. So the term universal access and universal services will be substituted with universal digital services so that it's much more inclusive. Next slide, please. The next chapter was looking at innovation as well as fair competition. And again here, the challenge was that we see that there's a lot of innovation, but then we are not necessarily incorporating it. There was a need for us to take into account digitization as well as the growth and development that has happened, convergence as well as the changing technological environment that we're in, which has certainly affected the market structure. In this regard, we then have introduced market review with the regulator to then will have to prescribe list of markets as well as market segments and then conduct market reviews in this regard. And we also indicated that the regulator must publish this sector performance report. We are still considering in terms of the timeline, whether it's going to be at a quarter or it will be twice annually. There is also a need in terms of strengthening the capacity of the regulator and ensuring that we also incorporate within the memorandum of cooperation. Cooperation between the regulator as well as the competition authorities. We have also seen this matter being thrashed out in the public, and we want to ensure that there's closer cooperation between the two, and the model would be that the outcomes of the engagements between the two or whichever party, the others then will be able to take that into consideration. The issues of mergers and acquisitions, which we have seen recently, we're also hoping that the policy interventions would then address this in order to improve and increase cooperation between the regulators to avoid the issues of selective as well as forum shopping, and then the potential delays. Next slide. With regards to the innovation and fair competition, we're currently reviewing the Electronic Communications Act. So the amendment bill is also going to address the competition matters. The department has drafted the Electronic Communications Amendment Bill to factor in the issues related or the recommendations that came out from the Competition Commission's latest report on data service market inquiry. And the focus of the amendments is therefore to improve the competition and to also ensure that even the new regulator would also then take into consideration, or within their scope and mandate, would also then look at issues of competition. And therefore that would then make it more agile, and it will then be able to address then the anti-competitive issues that are playing out within the sector. Next slide. With regards, once again, to still continuing, my apologies, on the innovation and fair competition, the department, ICASA, and the competition commission, they have joined forces in carrying out interventions, and in the main, that they will then conduct market inquiry on data services, and also continue then to monitor the outcomes of the previous report. ICASA as well as the Competition Commission, they've signed then the memorandum of an agreement between the two parties in order to then look at concurrence issues and in the various jurisdictions. Then the effect of this is then obviously we're hoping that we will jointly monitor the issues related, especially anti-competitive behavior, and be able to address that by both parties, because the Competition Commission would only then, at the moment, they make recommendations, but then they have to be effectively implemented. And ICASA, we've identified then is the right authority within the sector to do so. To the effect, the review of Section 67 of the ECA is underway, as I indicated, to ensure then that the preconditions of regulatory actions are proportionated to mode as well as the type of regulatory action that is required. And then again last year, there were collaborative approaches between the department and the regulators. And this, we're happy to announce, members, has then resulted in a 33% reduction of data prices in the 1 gig across all major operators. Each one, we appreciate the fact that they've come to the party, and then they also conceded and committed to reducing the prices of data. With regards to the internet, which is then the main engine for a digital economy, what we've seen as South Africa under the policy review was that the impact that the internet continues to have in the livelihood of our citizens and community. And therefore, there's a need for an integrated approach from a governance of the internet at an international as well as at a national level, in as far as the policies as well as managing the administration of the internet in line with the visions that were set out in the World Summit on Information Society. I know, members, that this is always a topical debate with regards to the management of public policy, but our position has been that it is a multi-stakeholder process, but as government, they are the role in terms of setting out the public policies in consultations with all relevant stakeholders. So the key principles we still maintain that the management of the internet should be a multilateral, transparent, and a democratic process with the full involvement of all stakeholders, that mainly is government, the private sector, civil society, international and national organizations across the sphere. We want to ensure that the internet is based on open standards and, more than anything else, facilitates innovation. But we're also mindful, and as it is very lately, that we must also look at the protection of personal data. So our policy position remains net neutrality for the sector, and therefore that we need to uphold the principles of open internet. We also looked at policy interventions, and we're currently working on that with regards to the hosting of data centers. And government in this regard is encouraged to put measures for the establishment of data centers. We also put in a policy intervention with regards to search and navigation and facilitating the development, most certainly, of local search engines as well as browser applications. At a later stage, we can engage in as far as the fact that if you look at most of the search engines, there are very few made in Africa, and most certainly for us as South Africa, we're falling behind in this, so we need to stimulate this area. By doing so, you are keeping the traffic local, but you're also stimulating the economy. We also looked at the electronic numbering in terms of the sector to conduct an inquiry into the impact of the e-numbering technology protocol. And lastly, with regards to the internet governance, we are also then saying that the sector regulator would manage this process together with also the relevant agencies or governance institutions in South Africa, and then propose recommendations to address this. Next slide. So in this regard, again, we're looking at the amendments to the ECA, which we have commenced on, to address the issues related to cost to communicate, community networks, ineffective service-based competition, and the lack of sharing. We're also then looking at a sector regulator, and also then the sector regulator to conduct inquiry into the net neutrality issues. The report is yet to be finalized, but the work is underway. We also have been working on a data and cloud policy, which we have drafted as a department. We've engaged within the institutions of government, and it's now going to be tabled in cabinet. The data policy and cloud, amongst others, certainly it advocates for data centers, but it also talks to the issues, members, as you would have known lately, whether it was the Facebook issue last year on the protection of data and how then the data should be managed at a national level. And recently you've heard in terms of the the transactions between Facebook and WhatsApp. We want to address those. But more than anything else, we were advocating that data needs to be stored locally. We have the Digital Development Fund that will then address the ICT infrastructure and services. And the fund, as I indicated earlier, will and must support local innovation. Lastly, under the sector regulator, in partnership with DCDT as well as other, the National IGF Forum and other partners, including the NGOs. We are then looking in terms of the internet governance, our participation at the National Internet Governance Forum, as well as the international governance forums and other international and regional continental bodies, the ICANN, AFRINIC, etc. On the other chapter that we also worked on in the ICT policy is the open access policy that would stimulate infrastructure and supply side issues. So this, as you would know, is that as much as we have a number of infrastructure and network, the challenge was the skewed rollout in South Africa. And we looked at the challenges also was the high cost communication, as well as the concentrated broadband infrastructure in certain markets, and especially in urban areas. So the principles was the effective access to infrastructure by competitors. We also wanted to, we still advocate for transparency. Access must be provided in a way that is clear to all the market players, and then it must also be non-discriminatory. One of those is certainly the issues that if there's going to be new entry players, they also should then have access in terms of the facilities of the sites that the other operators have built. We were preparing this for an environment where if there are going to be new operators or emerging operators, they should then have an open access to the infrastructure. And one of those policy interventions, Chair and honorable members, was then the open access regime within the mobile market. As you would know now, last year we issued a policy directive with regards to an introduction of a new player, the Wireless Open Access Network, famously known as WON. And that is basically to not only just to transform the industry, but we are also hoping that with the introduction of a new player, especially in the wholesale market, will then result in more service offerings, but will also reduce the cost of communications to the citizens. And then we're also encouraging through the policy intervention that the regulator will then be fair in the process of the licensing of the WON, and will also then ensure that the consortium promotes these principles, as I said, ensuring transformation, empowerment, but also the competitive neutrality and encouraging then the BE or broader based participation. Next slide. In this regard, as I indicated, last year we've already issued the policy directive. ICASA had published the ITAs both for the high demand spectrum as well as the WON. They've already closed the application for the high demand spectrum, and the WON will close on the end of March 2021. My apologies, there's a typo there. And we are hoping then that the regulator, independent but would ensure that the WAN meets the principles that government wishes to achieve, and that also it has to create a favorable market for the WAN to be able to flourish. And therefore the issues related to your open access principles, and therefore open access in as far as facilities leasing would be adhered to. And more than anything else, there has to be a minimum threshold in the empowerment. Chair and honorable members, in this regard, we are encouraging that the WAN must have participation of SMMEs and at least 20%. And I would like to emphasize that it's at least 20% shareholder by Black women. It can be more, and we would welcome that. Next slide. And continuing with regards to the open access, the department is working towards the finalization of the data and cloud policies, which then covers that the existing networks of our state-owned entities, such as Centex, CETA, Broadband, Infraco, etc., will then form the new state development infrastructure company, and then also the establishment of a high performance. And one of the other recommendation is that we must have a high performance computing and data processing center. This must be owned by the state, and this will then process data and incorporate the cloud from the cloud computing capacity. We are also then encouraging the establishment of digital and ICT special economic zones to support local and foreign investment in data and cloud infrastructure and services. In this regard, the CETA, our state-owned entity, is ensuring that there are cloud services in each of our provinces. On the radio frequency spectrum, another very topical issue. We note this is a scarce resource, a national scarce resource. We could never have sufficient spectrum to cater for all. So we have to then be delicate in ensuring the distribution and allocation of this limited resource. In this regard, I think there have been gaps in terms of the spectrum management, and that have also resulted in terms of unclear roles and responsibility. And there's also an exclusive spectrum management, which then promotes economic growth for a few market players at the expense of the broader economic development. Our principles have been, and they remain, that we want to maximize the efficiency of spectrum within the country. We want to promote, because it's such a limited resource, infrastructure sharing amongst the players. We also want to promote openness, transparency, as well as non-discrimination. And the application and the use of the spectrum must be at a fair and equitable, but also optimal efficiency. As far as the policy interventions, a new clear framework is being introduced. We still maintain that the minister it lies and it's her responsibility in terms of the spectrum management. As you know from the ECA, she goes and she negotiates this in the international forum. The minister, let me say, she or he will then direct the regulator in as far as coming up with a national plan. We also do set aside spectrum for government use. That is very important. And we also then align this in terms of the national universal service obligations and spectrum licensing. With regards to the spectrum fees, there is a commercial as well as obviously public-based fees. And the special dispensation for spectrum fees for the provisions of especially the public service must then meet the public interest goals. The spectrum trading of non-high demand spectrum is permissible, and the trading of high demand spectrum is not permissible. And all high demand spectrum to be assigned on an open access basis. So we did indicate that we issued the policy direction last year, and then the regulator has then issued the 2 ITAs, the invitations to apply, and the one was for the current high demand spectrum, and the next was for the WAN. Members, I can also then indicate that we are currently busy with the 5G policy, to which again we will then license afterwards further spectrum for the 5th generation. Next slide. With regards to the rapid deployment policy, the challenges that we faced was that there was no uniform nationwide guidelines with regards to permits and authorization on the rollout of infrastructure, such as towers and ducts. And this then resulted at times in the duplication of infrastructure rollout, and at the same time, the balancing the rights in terms of licensees to enter property. We faced that particular challenge. There was also a lack of coordination between stakeholders in the different sectors. So our principles within the rapid deployment is to ensure that the ICT networks and key infrastructure programs or infrastructure, they then promote the socioeconomic development. The ECNS licensees, they will have the right to enter any property to deploy the infrastructure in order to service and to ensure nationwide coverage. The cooperation and coordination across the providers and the seekers, to the extent possible, needed to be on an open access basis, and there has to be transparency, and also to reduce all the administrative burdens in as far as the issuing of the permits. Our policy interventions, we looked at the automation of an approval of the permit system. We were also then ensuring an open, transparent process that would be standardized across, and then also the rights of ways of critical infrastructure and other utilities to be made available to communications entities and their networks. And then we also seek to establish the Rapid Deployment Steering Committee. This is also responded to in the amendment of the Electronic Communications Act. We've also drafted the rapid deployment policy and guidelines. We've engaged extensively with parties. We received over 600 submissions, which we are studying and incorporating them. We will then update the rapid deployment policy and table it to Cabinet. One of the challenges I must just share with the honorable members is then we have to look at mandating institutions in terms of who is going to manage this process. Currently, ICASA is not been given that particular mandate, and also because then it's cross-cutting with other sectors as well and departments. We have to then identify then the institution that is going to manage this. So that's one of the major hurdles that we would need to address before we finalize the policy. Next slide. On the digital society, this is within the NDP as well, that we want to ensure that South Africa is a knowledge-based information society by 2030. We've seen a number of challenges in this regard, some of it perpetuated by the digital divide in our country, but also equally the uneven capacity across government to roll out the digital solution services, and also then the uneven access across society and across the country to skills as well as capacity programs. And also to ensure that the citizens are able to engage meaningfully, utilizing ICTs and having then the adequate ICT gadgets at their disposal. The key objectives was then to promote the use of ICTs to transform the relationship between government and citizens, ensure that all South Africans, irrelevant of their location, will have access to quality public services as well as government information. We also want to reduce the cost of administration and increase the efficiency in order to deliver on these public services across the country. And in this regard, our interventions was the digital transformation of public service, and we've drafted the e-government strategy and roadmap, which has been adopted. And we're developing an open government data action plan and manual through consultations with relevant stakeholders. With regards to digital access, want to promote trust in ICT platforms and networks by reviewing all the relevant laws to assess if South Africa should consider introducing provisions to allow citizens to remove information from the internet that unfairly stigmatizes them. With regards to digital inclusion, we're looking in terms of government creating an enabling environment that extends reliable access to communications network, boosting the adoption of new technologies through digital government services, and promoting equally digital awareness and literacy, and promote the users from cybercrime. Next slide. And in this regard, as I said, that Cabinet approved the National E-Government Strategy. This is part of the program in terms of digital transformation of government. We are now in the implementation of that, being driven by CETA, our state-owned entity. But then equally, we also developed the national draft national smart communities framework and an e-government program for smart communities. We also want to make South Africa a digital transformed society, and the department is formalizing partnership with the Internet of Things Council and DBSA, which will then allow the implementation of e-government programs for smart communities. The department, together with CETA, continues with the implementation, as I indicated, of the e-government strategy, digitizing government services across, with specific focus on the front line. This has become more important as we have been faced with COVID and with the lockdown, but we understand that government still needs to perform its services, and therefore it's very important for us to ensure that all three spheres of government are then, the services are digitized in order then for the citizens to still receive the services. And we are therefore aiming to close that gap in as far as then those government offices that haven't yet been digitized. Next slide. Next slide, we did talk about this, the portal. So just to, honorable members, just to indicate that the priorities is certainly with regards to services under the South African Police Service, international relations, the higher education, basic education, small business, arts and culture, the social development and correctional services. The e-services are primarily responding to in terms of digitalization of government business process, big data and big data analytic, including business intelligence, and the establishment of an open digital platform for government. Next slide. On the postal policy, again here, the challenge was then how do you move the postal sector especially SAPO, in terms of its traditional services and making it more agile within the new digital economy. And in this regard, our objectives was then to ensure that we restructure and reposition SAPO to contribute towards the universal services of ICTs, making it more relevant in the digital economy and, more than anything else, central in as far as government service delivery, making it a player within the logistics payment as well as the distribution. Our principles was then to ensure that SAPO, as well as the postal sector widely, continues to provide universal access and also fulfills universal service obligations. We had to also look at defining a new national addressing system and also set out a framework for the Stamp Advisory Committee in as far as the stamp issuing processes. And your other logistics or in services sector who are not necessarily licensed and are regulated by ICASA, and we wanted to address that. Our policy interventions were then seeking, in response of this territorial, to address the market structure, address issues of competition as well as the licensing framework. And then in this regard, our recommendation is that SAPO retains exclusivity in the issuing of post stamps, and the regulator is then required to develop mechanisms to ensure and monitor compliance by the operators. We also then said no other entities allowed to provide services in the reserve market, and then the regulator must then also conduct a review of the market structure and develop license frameworks for the postal sector. With regards to the national addressing system, the policy provides for the governance of the address in terms of data production, aggregation, distribution, as well as the usage function within the country. SAPO remains the responsible entity for address production, allocations, and maintenance of the national address database. You would note that this is a very critical element, and we felt that it needed to remain within the ambit of government. We also then felt that as part of re-engineering and repurposing SAPO as well as the postal sector, that they must play a role with regards to financial inclusion, and also we looked at the introduction of the post bank, making it a fully fledged bank, corporatizing it, and in order to then maximize on the value of the post office infrastructure. The mandate of the post banks include the provision of insurance as well as other financial products, and the provision of electronic and mobile money. And we are also looking to then look at the regulations of these extraterritorial offices of exchange. Next slide. We have, to this regard, amended the Postal Services Bill, Currently, the bill was submitted for introduction in Parliament last year, following the coming into office of the new administration. We also drafted the SAPO Amendment Bill, which is intended to look at these interventions in terms of repositioning SAPO. And then we are also working with SAPO in the implementation of the national address rollout. We've also busy with the Post Bank bill, which will be coming to Parliament middle of this year. And we're seeking then in terms of the corporatizing of the Post Bank bill. Next slide. Honorable members, you would know that part of our objectives of the ICT policy is really to make and to grow the industry, readjust it and making it more responsive in the digital economy. We've identified a number of interventions as well as sector reform strategies. In the main, we will then be as part of us enabling an industry growth, looking at skills development, addressing issues of transformation and the BEE compliance, introducing incentives in order to stimulate local innovation. We are also looking to build and to grow the enterprise, especially in the small medium, and also to build on our research, development, and innovation, and then introduce the relevant policy regulations as well as strategies. In the main, our focus is with regards to 3 industry areas. In terms of ICT services, we're also wanting to build extensively for South Africa on software development, and also for us as a country to have a thriving electronic and hardware manufacturing industry. Next slide. In this regard, we have an ICT SMME development strategy, which was approved in Cabinet in 2017 and is currently being implemented. The strategy is currently being revised in order to align with the technological developments, so to enable the South African SMMEs to benefit from the opportunities associated with the digital economy. The programs implemented to date include, we've got a cell phone repair and skills program across 7 provinces to be exact. And this assists the SMMEs in order for them to build capability and skills in this area. We're also supporting the competitiveness of SA tech startups, assisting them in terms of introducing them to markets or creating platforms for them to showcase their innovation in the international platform. And as such, we've taken quite a number of SA tech startups as well as SMMEs to the international fora under the ITU Telecom World. And I'm happy to say that since we started this program, South Africa, by these SMMEs, have won quite a number of awards showing honorable members the capabilities and the potentials that we have in our country. Also, similarly within BRICS, a number of our SMMEs have been able to participate, and this has also resulted in some of them actually closing deals with the BRICS counterparts in the areas of electronic manufacturing as well as app development. The private sector also continues to invest billions of rands in activities to support SMME development through various enterprise development programs. And we're happy that they continue then to stimulate the sector. The department is also in the process of finalizing the digital economy master plan. This is part of the interventions that government is making in as far as stimulating the economy. The digital economy master plan seeks to grow the digital economy and transformation. Our focus is basically on these 5 critical enablers, which is digital inclusion, skills for the work, responsive governance, innovation and competitiveness, as well as government digitization. Certainly, as you've seen from the previous, our intent here is to really stimulate through the special economic zones, as well as hubs across the country, local innovation that is going to be responsive to the needs on the ground. And we've already started seeing some of the work in this regard. So the implementation plan for the digital economy master plan, it has already been developed. It continues to be consulted with various stakeholders. We've reached out in terms of public sector. We are also participating in the Presidential Infrastructure Investment Forum, and we've also received quite a number of pledges to support local innovation. And we're also then stimulating more investment within the sector. In a nutshell, Chair, we're trying to build on an architecture that will create an enabling environment for our SMMEs to produce local innovation. But equally, we know that they have already been doing that, but what is missing is funding to support them. So we will also support them also in creating a market for them, and more than anything else, encourage government as well as its partners to ensure that it utilizes and takes up that particular local innovation. So the department continues to work again with the ICT BBBE Sector Council. We already produced the report last year. We've seen some inroads in terms of the transformation of the sector, but certainly we acknowledge that more needs to be done. And then the continuous review of the BBBE ICT sector codes to ensure broader economic inclusions of Black people, as well as participation and of citizens, especially youth, women, as well as people with disability. We're happy that from a sector perspective, there has been an interest and appetite and collaboration and cooperation in this regard. Last, on the institutional framework, the challenges that we've had is that we had quite a number of these public entities under. Some of them were looking in terms of the duplication of work, but certainly duplications of resources, and this has resulted in some instances inefficiency as well as ineffectiveness of the regulations. And there was also a need for a whole government commitment to digital transformation. And we have to then look at a holistic approach to governance, regulation, and administration of the ICT sector and coordination across the internet and digital value chain. The regulations of the ICT sectors currently, as I indicated, the duplication spread across a number of entities, including Ministry, ICASA, .ZEDNA, as well as USASA. And this, another challenge was the challenge with structures that have been put in place to address the possible digital divide. So whilst we have so many of these entities looking at regulations, we were still seeing continued digital divide. Key principles was the institutions have and must have distinct mandate to focus on. Regulation of the sector must focus on realizing government's objectives for the sector and ensuring maximum public beneficiation, and as well as efficient utilization of public resources. The government's obligation was to ensure inclusive and sustainable development, and its responsibility therefore was to counter market failures and ensure equity will be paramount. In this regard, we are looking at dissolving USASA and USAF in order to create a new digital development fund. As I indicated earlier, this fund will then stimulate local innovation, will also stimulate broadly the digital infrastructure programs as well as the gaps that are there. The other area was another entity is then a new ICT sector commission and tribunal that will be established to regulate the sector across the ICT value chain, including the internet as well as the postal sector. This regulator that is being proposed will have the sole responsibility of overseeing and promoting internet governance, licensing, regulation of the internet, as well as looking at issues of spectrum.
DG?
Yes, Chair.
You can see you are in a grace period. You try and
okay.
wrap up.
Thank you. Okay, Chair. Next slide. As I indicated, I've already spoken to that we have already in the process of drafting the framework for the Digital Development Fund. And we are also then going to currently studying the effects of the business case for the merger of the regulators in this regard. Next slide. On the audiovisual and media policy, this is also another area that we've seen that was not given focus previously. There's a need for us to stimulate the audiovisual sector and the digital economy, and also and restructure the audiovisual and the distribution of the ecosystem. In this regard, we've introduced, in terms of policy interventions, a market structure and licensing framework. The regulator must conduct and review the market structure. It must ensure access to broadcasting services. It must create certainty as well as stability, and must also then strengthen the public broadcaster. With regards to we are reviewing the draft frameworks that we have, but also looking again with regards to the work that is being done by the other stakeholders. We've done engagements across the country, and we will then continue our consultations with these outstanding entities as well in order to conclude on the draft white paper. Next slide. Chair, that concludes our presentation. Just in closing, to then say, one of the challenges that we continue to share is the fact that we do not have provincial presence. So our work then relies in the collaboration with the three spheres of government, or provincial and local government. And also then the vehicle that we use is our entities in order to drive these programs. Just very quickly, Chair, in conclusion, to then say some of the key projects that we are doing is that the BDM project, the digital broadcasting, we are finalizing it in the 4 provinces, Northwest, Northern Cape, Limpopo, as well as the Free State, in as far as the distribution of the set-top boxes. And then with regards to the remaining provinces, we will be issuing a voucher system. We continue to roll out training programs across the country in various provinces. And then lastly, Chair, we are also working with in the SA Connect project as well in rolling out broadband rollout. Currently, at the moment, we've rolled out in the Eastern Cape 300 sites, and we are also going to be rolling out in the other provinces, looking at KZN as well as Limpopo. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, DG, and thanks to the Deputy Minister. DM, unless there is something you want to say before I ask members to engage your presentation?
Chair, I think I'm fine. Let's allow members to ask for clarity-seeking questions.
Okay, thank you very much, DM. I will start with Honorable Bibi, and then Honorable Smith, Honorable Arnolds, Honorable Klute, Honorable Nana, and lastly, Honorable Ngwenya, in that order.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson. Greetings to you, DM, and your team. I just have got 2 questions, Chairperson. The first one will be, how will the department, through the ICT white paper, ensure that the auction or selling of the spectrum does not further benefit the dominant industry players to the disadvantage of small players, especially the new players entering the telecommunication market? And my second question, DM, sorry about that. Has anything been done yet to ensure that licensed operators do fulfill their license obligations instead of opting for paying fines, as such practices seem to undermine government objectives of making communication services accessible to everyone? Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Bibi. If you feel like you are not okay, you are free to move out of the platform, because I can hear that you are not very well. It's not a problem. You can leave the platform if you feel like you are indeed not feeling that well. Honorable
Okay,
Smith.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'll do.
Honorable Smith. Okay, we can pass to Honorable Arnold.
Thank you, Chairperson, and also thank you for the presentation on the National Integrated ICT Policy White Paper. Chair, yes, it is indeed important for every household to be connected. And we must use ICT to reduce the gap between the haves and the have-nots, between the connected and the disconnected. And the digital divide is not just between developed and developing countries, it is also between the privileged and the not so privileged in our communities. My first question relates to the Digital Development Challenge Fund that is there established to close the digital divide. Can the department just brief us in terms of how this fund will be financed? Then the other question is, when will the department finalize the digital when will they finalize the digital economic development master plan? When will we see the finalization of the DEM? So if they can give us information about that. And then how will SMMEs benefit from the digital economy? Because I think that is also an opportunity for those SMMEs to benefit. But then also, I think we are sitting with a great challenge, and we know that we have asked, and there was campaigns also about the high cost of data. We can recall there was also the campaign that data must fall, and now last year, and we were in one of the committee meetings where the department was engaged with regulators, and now we see there is it's going to be a 33% reduction in data prices, but I think that is not even close to what needs to be done or what needs to happen. Data, actually the cost of communication here in South Africa is too high, and we need interventions and transformation in this regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable Klute.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm going through the pages of the slide, so they can just maybe just go through the pages as well. On page 5, it speaks about the postal sector reform, and the last bullet point, it points out the expansion or expanding the role and obligation of the Post Bank. We also heard about the Post Bank bill that will be introduced soon. Now, the Minister in October last year actually spoke about the unbundling of the Post Bank away from the Post Office or Postal Service. Is this on the table still? So will the Post Bank bill look at the unbundling of the Post Bank? And if so, what business model are we looking at? And will the Post Bank then fall under the Department of Communication or Treasury or state-owned enterprises? How do they suppose or propose to do that? On page 6, we have mention on policy intervention. We look at dissolving the USASA and transforming the USAF fund into a standalone funding agency. And then there's mention of the Digital Development Fund. Now, on the next page, they also speak about the Challenge Fund. And then it says it's fully described on the institutional frameworks below. I would like to have more information about this Challenge Fund, and I can't find it on the institutional frameworks. Maybe I missed it, but I would really like more information about this Challenge Fund and what exactly it is. On page 8, we see a mention on the policy interventions, mention of a memorandum of cooperation between the regulator and the competition authorities. I would like to know what the memorandum of cooperation was between those two authorities. On page 12, last bullet point, it mentions the establishment of a national IGF. Can we just know what find out what an IGF is? Because I don't see a description of that acronym. So if you can just...
Honorable Klute, are you still with us? You are muted.
Sorry, there I am. Sorry. Let's speak about...
You can repeat from IGF.
I would just like to know what the IGF is. Then I would like to speak about the wireless open access network. I would like to know, because we're now in the process of the bidding, which will soon open, or it's already open, and very soon the wholesaler will be appointed. I would like to know what criteria, apart from the broad-based Black economic empowerment and 20% women, Black women, I would like to know what other criteria are we looking at when the decision to appoint the wholesaler. What criteria will ICASA use on that, in that process? Page 15 mentions the special economic zones. I would like to have more information on what exactly they aim with the SEZs. Also, the National E-Services portal, I quickly have had a look, and you have to register for that, and you have to give a lot of information on that portal. your address, your ID number, cell phone number, email address. My question is, what measures are in place to ensure that our personal information is protected on that portal, and are they protected? Because you know, in this day and age, data is everything, and personal details. How is that protected? And then the last question is on the TV licenses. Now, last year the SABC made proposals, even in this this committee as well, to have a model where TV licenses are gathered from MultiChoice and Netflix. So I asked the minister about this, and the minister actually said the department has not developed a policy and is not aware of such a proposal by the SABC, but it is in the media, and I would just like to know what the department's policy on this is, in view that the minister said it's not a policy actually, but can the department now say, and maybe the deputy minister say, that this is not an option, that service providers such as MultiChoice and Netflix won't collect TV licenses? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Klute. Honorable Nana.
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity. Firstly, I would like to apologize for Honorable Smith if he doesn't reconnect. He has got connectivity issues. That takes me to my first comment, Chair, made by the Deputy Minister. Essentially, in her closing comments, she said no one must be left behind. Now, I really like what the Deputy Minister has said, but then it begs the question: if at this day and age in our country we still have connectivity issues, I mean, I'm not the only one, and honorable members will agree with me. Today we can't switch on our videos because our bandwidth is just too unstable. And this occurs to people like me and you. How much more detrimental effect does this have to people in deep rural areas? Surely they're being left behind. And I'm saying this, Chair, because I have observed that COVID-19 has actually laid our weaknesses bare as the country. I have always been hallucinating under false pretense that we are probably the first world of Africa. And with COVID-19, our own connectivity can't carry the very few million South Africans who rely on internet. So I just wanted to make that comment. Chair, the second issue is on what the department has mentioned insofar as expanding the role and obligations of Postbank. I do understand that Postbank is different or is independent from the post office. But I want to tweak the department's mind about contingency plans. You know, I have observed a rather sorry state of affairs at our post offices. I'm sorry, at rather a sorry state of affairs in our post offices. Ever since the president announced the 350 rand payouts to unemployed people. Chairperson, umuntu phezu komuntu, omunye phezu komunye in our post offices today. And I do understand that those people are desperate. Those 350 rands are worth 3,500 rand to most of them, if not all. But I really do find it to be insensitive. I just do not like the manner in which it's being done. I do get a feeling that these people are being dehumanized. I mean, people will be queuing at the post office as early as 6 o'clock and would only be able to go home if they are lucky with their money at about 4:30 in the afternoon. So I really wanted to tweak the department's mind in this regard. Have they bothered to pay visits to our post offices and see what happens? And what mostly makes me nervous, ordinary users of the post office, just like myself, can't go to the post office on those days because it is just too dangerous to do so. It's absolutely not safe to do so. People are queuing one on top of another. There is no social distancing. People are not wearing masks. Nobody is enforcing COVID protocols. Not even a queue marshal that tells people to continuously keep their mask on. And most of these guys are young people who are known to be carriers of this of the virus, and the virus affects us as the elderly quite badly. So I wanted to tweak the department's mind in this regard. Chair, it doesn't help to continuously lament about the digital divide. The biggest question that we should ask ourselves: what have we done as government to mitigate this digital divide? You know, Mama Bibi has touched on it, and it's a pity she had to disconnect. I hope she gets well soon. Mama Bibi has touched on the issue of the spectrum. I know Umankala in her presentation did mention that applications closed last year, others are closing in March this year. But what I really find unacceptable, Chair, is the long period that players in the space had to endure before government or the department finally do something about it. It pains me when people who want to get into the space, they can't, because their very own government is sitting on its hands. So it pains me, Chair, but Mama Bibi has dealt with that sufficiently. Honorable Arnold's, Chair, touched on the issue of affordability. If you want to deal with the digital divide effectively, there are a few things that you need to do. One of those, connectivity costs have got to be affordable to an ordinary person on the street. It was reported last year that in Nigeria, you pay 730 Rand for 110 gigabytes. And this is the price charged by MTN, our own company. MTN in Nigeria is charging Nigerians for 110 gigabytes, 730 Rand. A South African company, our own company, in South Africa, not even 110 gigabytes, but 100 gigabytes. It charges South Africans 2,500. which is about 300% more. It's criminal, Chair, to say the least. It's unacceptable. So, Chair, and I did pick it up in the presentation, Kamangala, in slide number 10, that they're doing everything they can to try and then keep the cost of connectivity down. It's not enough, Chair. A lot needs to be done. Chair, on page 20 of the presentation, the department mentions the importance of us trusting the internet platform. And I fully agree with that. I fully agree with that. But can I check with the department, Chair? As recent as a few weeks ago, Russians have been accused to have attacked the American cyberspace. Now, I asked myself a question: who we are if American cyberspace can be breached? I asked myself, how safe is our cyberspace? How safe is my data? Because it is in the cyberspace as well. So I wanted to get some assurance from the department that I would want to get some assurance from the department as to what is it that they are doing to ensure that my data, your data, and everybody else's data in South Africa is safe in their hands. And I do know this data is not stored in South Africa, it's stored elsewhere. But as a government, you must have control over our data. The WhatsApp new privacy policy, Chair. I hear the department is addressing the matter, but I don't think it should stop there. I don't think this is what South Africans want to hear. My interest in the whole Facebook, WhatsApp debacle, I am interested in knowing whether the new privacy policy of WhatsApp and Facebook that they're trying to push down our throats, whether that policy is consistent with South African law. So if the department would have come to me and said, we have done our investigation, this is where this policy stands, I would be happy. But to say we are addressing the issue, to me, it's not sufficient. It's basically papering over cracks, which I don't think it's sufficient, Chair. I would want to check whether that the Facebook WhatsApp policy is consistent with our South African laws. Chair, COVID in China is linked to the advent of 5G. Or shall I say, it is alleged by some fundis that COVID has a direct link to the advent of 5G. Has the department investigated these allegations, and do we have any reasons to be worried as South Africans? Chair, I would want to come for a second bite. I've got 3 more questions, but I don't really want to take over your meeting.
No, Honorable Nana, you can ask them so that when they respond on all of them.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for indulgence, Chair.
Yeah.
Chair, Umangala has also said they are in a process of training young people so that these young people can repair and service cell phones. She knows, Chair, as much as I do, that that space, that market is saturated by foreigners. That space has completely been taken over by Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, and a few of our brothers from the African continent. But your major players in that space are foreigners. So if you train your youth to repair and fix cell phones, we are basically throwing them to the wolves. They will not survive. Besides the department training them, what other measures are in place to ensure that they are not thrown to the wolves, to ensure that their skills are put into practice and they can earn a living, given the fact that that market is already saturated by foreigners? And hear me out, Chair. I've got nothing against foreigners. This is not xenophobic, but it's reality. The last two, Chair, I've dealt with reliability and connectivity. The last one, Chair, I've heard and I continue to hear and read on our social media individuals promoting hate, violence, and sometimes calling for war in our country. And sometimes calling for war in our country. And I'm not for a minute suggesting that government should interfere in what we are saying and in what we are writing. But surely, Chair, if a South African, if somebody within the borders of our country promotes hate, violence, and calls for war in some instances, government has got to take a particular interest in such communication from that person. What is it that our department is doing to provide teeth in putting a stop to people that are promoting hate, violence, and war in our country? Thank you very much, Chair, and my sincere apologies for being too long. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nana. Honorable Ngwenya.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good afternoon to the honorable members. Chair, let me first appreciate the work done by the department, which is very impressive. I want to focus on policies that are developed and those to be finalized. My request is for all policies to have deadline date of completion and for bills to indicate straight stages of approval. This will assist intervention that might be required from the committee in terms of fast-tracking the purpose of the progress. Chairperson, my question on the dignitally on Chapter 10, Chair, I wanted to check that on the Dignitary Development Challenges Fund, is it possible to establish how much funding we are talking about and from which sources will it be taken? Let me also, Chair, appreciate the government strategy for smart communities when we are going to see a link between all departments in terms of the citizen data to ensure that there is no duplication of resources to the same people, and also that services are going to intend recipients. COVID-19 has taught us the importance of having clean citizen data on all government portals. We saw the challenges with one-person access, grant payment from different departments, e.g. NEFSA, NSFAS, student getting the extended grant for unemployment people, and so forth. Chairperson, I've got another question. I wanted to check, Chair, that what are the new plans in place with the new policy in fighting issues of cyber security and cyber crimes, especially the ICT in schools and government institutions? I want to check again, Chair, what intention best practices were conducted by the department in proposing in wires open access network as a single wholesale broadband operation. And the third one, I want what will be the state of affairs insofar as the statutory bodies like ICASA are connected insofar as job security or job creation in connected. Insofar as the new policy in concern, what are the plans in place at improvement the ICT lives of the citizen in the rural area, farms, and informal settlement? Lastly, Chairperson, can we have an outline of how best our rural communities can take advantage of the benefits that came with the electronic communication amendment?
Thank you very much, Honorable Ngwenya. I've got questions that have been forwarded by Honorable Modise that DM we should also attend to. The first one is the department having system in place to make sure that disadvantaged communities get information on time? As the DM said, nobody should be closed out. The other one is, when the department is outsourcing spectrum, what measures are they putting in place to make sure that public sector have enough spectrum? On spectrum, DM, the other question that I can put it in another way is to say, if when we are auctioning spectrum, do we have measures or do we have a clause in our sale of those spectrum to service providers to say part of what you need to do is to put infrastructure in rural areas? If you hear everyone is putting that there should be infrastructure in rural areas so that connectivity, there could be equality in terms of access to the network. So is there a provision in our sale of spectrum that will also ensure that that infrastructure is not put again in areas where there is already infrastructure, while rural areas are still disadvantaged? The reason why you hear everybody speaking about that is our constituency. And if that constituency is not attended, we might not see the reason. Who are we representing here as members of parliament? The last one is on Postbank DM. The last time we were informed that there are still some other issues that the minister need to put to cabinet. So we just want to check how far are we, and in terms of making sure that indeed the Postbank becomes the bank in line with, or even the application to the Reserve Bank. How far is it? If you can just share with us, DM and your team. I'm handing over to you. DM.
Person? Yes. While I'm going to allow the acting DG and her team to respond to issues that honorable members have raised with regard to the white paper, I would also want to suggest, especially on the issues around 5G and the developments around the arguments around 5G and COVID, I would want to propose to members of the NCOP to say, maybe between ourselves, the NCOP Select Committee and the PCC in the National Assembly, let's take the route that the Premier of KZN took and invite Professor Marwala and ICASA and other knowledgeable teams to take us through some of the things and professional information that will assist us to be able to be empowered around the issues that and the misinformation that happens across the world. It's not unique to South Africa, but it's cutting across. So with your permission, Chair, between you and Chairperson Maneli, if you can agree that we ask our minister to coordinate that meeting with Prof. Chilizi Marwana and the other team members, including ICASA, to demystify some of these things and empower our own members of parliament on it. It's a proposal, Chair, which
I take note of that, DM. I think it's a good proposal, even though I have not yet tested it with members, but on behalf of them, I'm saying it's a good proposal so that we indeed have clarity in, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Allow me to hand over to Menon Kribena, our acting DG. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Deputy Minister, and thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, for the questions. Chair, maybe just to start off, especially with regards to on the spectrum, I know that the Deputy has indicated that we will have a follow-up session, and I think it's prudent that we invite the regulator. Chair, when we issue the policy direction that was issued last year, our objectives were certainly that we want, or the licensees that have been given license must promote the universal provisions and services in as far as connectivity, and must ensure broadband coverage in rural and underserved areas. We put specific emphasis on that, Chair. on this, because of the same concern that some of these licensees have actually had the spectrum for the past 26 years, but we are not seeing much improvement or a total coverage, especially in the remote and rural areas. What is of concern, Chair, is additionally, the minister, when she issued the policy direction on the high demand spectrum in 2019, it explicitly said that the authority must consider amongst the following, the terms and conditions, including universal services and access obligations. But what we've noted in the invitations to apply that the regulator had issued, that there are no universal service and access obligations imposed. This is a matter that we are concerned about, but unfortunately, it is what is currently contained in the ECA that states that the regulator may consider, the word may consider, gives them then the independency to consider to take it up or not. And in this regard, we are rather concerned that the authority is not taking this into consideration, especially in as far as the WAN and ensuring that the WAN will therefore be sustainable, Chair. So that I just wanted to discuss. Additionally, on the spectrum, we issued a COVID policy directions specifically to then to urge and to ask then the regulator to issue temporal license to our operators in order for them to provide schools connectivity and connect critical government services, because we saw this need. Chair, that particular program is currently being run, but we are not seeing the maximum benefit from the policy direction. And that is why, Chair, I think the big debate that continues on why we want to amend the ECA so that there's probably closer alignment in as far as when we issue the policy directive in favor of public interest, that the regulator will then implement it accordingly. And it's not that we're trying to do undue influence, but it's because we want to achieve the objectives that have been set out, that we all have given and emphasized on ensuring universal service and access, and ensuring that the cost of communication is reduced for citizens. Chair, I'm going to ask my colleague to touch on the Digital Development and Challenge Fund in terms of how it will be financed. And also equally, I think a follow-up question on the Digital Development Fund was an indication of how much funding there is. When it's finally established, Chair, just to indicate, whatever that is under the USAF will then be transferred into the new fund. But additionally, we're also going to be sourcing funding from the private sector. I'll ask then Mr. Alfwoods to speak to that. I'll ask DDG Khadele to speak to the issues related to the data and the privacy, as well as the issues related to hate speech. And then lastly, Mr. Collins Mashile to then speak on the SABC and the license. With your permission, Chair.
No, I've given you space, DG and DM, to respond. The ball is in your court. You can direct who must come, until you say you are done.
Thank you, Chair. I'll ask Mr. Alf Wilson, then followed by DDG Khadebe, as well as Mr. Mashele.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, honourable members. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Digital Development Challenge Fund. So there were two questions. One was about how challenge funds work and providing more details about that. And then similarly, the matter of financing. So just to give a short overview of that. So the intention is to disestablish and dissolve USASA, but then to transform the USAF into a Digital Development Challenge Fund. Now, to pause there, the fund was benchmarked on the Jobs Fund under Treasury. So that's a hugely successful challenge fund that's been operating from at least 2010, Chair. So a business case was developed for the Ddcf that would then become accountable to the Minister. Its mandate will be to co-finance projects by public and private organizations to contribute to closing the digital divide and really benefit beneficiaries across the value chain. But it must continue to deal with universal access and service provision. So, Chair, challenge funds are characterized by open, competitive application processes, which really provides applicants with a once-off limited duration grant to overcome uncertainties that inhibit innovation, research and development, investment, and new approaches to development interventions. And the requirement would be that there must be matched funding to ensure collaborative risk-taking. Chairperson and honourable members, in this respect, an investment committee comprised of industry-nominated private sector experts and relevant government officials will guide the operations of the DDCF and must approve the applications of the DDCF expenditure, but they in turn must be supported by a technical evaluation committee. The fund's investment decisions will be guided by an investment framework that is technology neutral, leaving the market and the private sector to propose appropriate technology solutions. The investment framework will provide for once-off contributions to fund capital costs, but also ongoing funding to subsidize operations. Importantly, the periodic focus areas would be formalized annually via funding windows approved by the Minister. And the Minister from her side, with the department support, will be required to do in-depth market analysis of the ICT landscape to guide the decisions in line with the trends and relevant requirements of the ICT sector. So the annual funding windows would then be about specific areas that need that policy intervention is needed and funding must be directed towards. Chair, in due course, as we approach Parliament with the bill, we will then go into further detail. But the essence of it is that the fund will operate as a Schedule 3A public entity, which is similar to the current use of public entity. It does require an amendment of the ECA, and that's why an ECA bill is being drafted for this purpose, as was indicated in the presentation. We've been working on a business case, and even when it came to the business case, we didn't just take the white paper policy as is, which states that this must be done, but a status quo analysis had to be done first as part of the exercise to develop the business case to make sure that this is in fact correct, and that there's no alternative remedy to resolve the problem. So, of course, it will have HR-related concerns as well, but those are being taken care of, and in due course, a PMO will be established to manage the overall process. But the first key enabler would be to bring a bill to Parliament for your consideration. If I can just pause and go to the other important part, which is the financing, because that may be of concern. So under the current framework, the USAF is funded by license contributions under Section 89 of the ECA. So that will not change as the first phase of this project. So the current phase would suggest that that part of the law does not have to be changed, and the contributions will continue, which means that the current medium-term expenditure framework and budget allocations to USASA and USAF will continue as is, and accordingly be used for the DDCF in the short to medium term. But then, Chair, in time, we then would propose a second phase for the DDCF. Now, the precursor was let's change the framework first and ensure we have a new fund. And once this fund is efficient and effective, then we can deal with the second phase. And we also have such conditions from Treasury. And once you have an efficient fund, then additional sources of funding can be secured. And what will happen there is Treasury would be more comfortable in allocating additional funds to the Digital Development Challenge Fund. But in addition, in that second phase, one will then have to also look at increasing the scope of the DDCF. We know in the age of the fourth industrial revolution, for example, there are many potential challenges that we need to address in that framework, and therefore the scope of the DDCF will in due course include 4IR. But of course, 4IR is not limited to the ICT sector, which means at that point in time you also have to look for funding beyond just ICT licensees, and that would be the considerations at that point in time, including of course donor funding and other funding that can be secured. I do hope that answers the question. Thank you, Honourable Chair and members.
Afternoon, honourable members. My name is Jabu Khatebe here. I'm supposed to respond to questions with regards to data costs, data protection, but with your permission, Chair, maybe let me also respond to the question that was posed regarding the finalization of the digital economic master plan. That economic master plan will be finalized by the end of this year, latest beginning of next quarter of the next financial year. The strategy itself has been completed. We're just having internal consultation with the minister with a view of getting approval. And the other question was, how will SMME benefit from the digital economy master plan? They will benefit in a number of ways. One of the things we're looking at is to look at the whole value chain of any system and say, what role can SMME play? So the implementation plan will identify that, but over and above that, we'll also identify what role the government should play in assisting the implementation of that particular master plan, including the SMMEs. But the other thing that we will be considering is, at a practical level, is the establishment of what we call the Digital Transformation Center. And that, in essence, will be to assist mainly SMME. The challenges we face today with the the digital technology SMME is that you would come up with a concept. Now you need to further develop that concept into a product. And once you have a product, you need to get financiers, capital investment into that project so as to realize that opportunity. Now, the Digital Transformation Center will assist small SMMEs in bringing together all relevant parties so that whatever you do can be done from one central place. Once you've got a concept, someone can assist you as to what you should do to develop that concept into a product and where do you go for finance, etc., etc. So that I see that as a very critical tool to support SMMEs. Now, with regards to data protection, the data and cloud policy deals with data protection. But again, we need to understand that, there is data protection with regards to personal information, and there is general data. Issues around personal information are dealt with by the POPIA, which is the Protection of Personal Information Act, which is managed by the information regulator, who is primarily responsible for ensuring compliance to that. Now, we have been in contact with the information regulator, and what is currently happening is that they are currently engaging with WhatsApp and Facebook in order to analyze to what extent do they comply or deviate from the POPIA. And being an interested party, we will be following those developments. But with regards to data protection, one of the things we're doing as government is to, one of the policy proposals is that we need to establish what we call a high performance data center for government, so that all government data is stored, one, within the borders of South Africa, two, within government custody. So that is one way of protecting our data, and that is what we are proposing. I cannot agree more with the honorable members with regards to, the need for data costs to fall. Something has been done, and clearly it is not good enough. Now, just to give the members an idea of what has happened during COVID, schools, many people had to go offline. One of the things we did was to negotiate with the operators so that we can zero rate a number of education sites. Over 1,000 of them were zero rated to facilitate that. The health portal was zero rated, the COVID health portal was zero rated to facilitate, ease of communication. So that was done. But over and above that, there are a number of other initiatives that are in the pipeline which should contribute to the reduction of data costs. Clearly, the licensing of the spectrum it is envisaged that it will impact on the cost of data going forward, especially taking into consideration that we will be consuming data on a much more larger scale. It is critical that that cost is affordable. Otherwise, will perpetuate the digital divide. ICASA is working on a facilities leasing regulations, which would also assist in contributing to the downfall of data. But over and above that, we have identified the need for, ICASA and the Competition Commission to work together so that we can streamline some of these approaches. To that end, the ICASA and the Competition Commission have signed an MOU. Over and above that, they will be sharing information on some of these competition issues. Hopefully that would have a greater impact in reducing the cost to communicate or the cost of data. Well, I think those were the issues that I was supposed to respond to, Chairperson.
Good evening, Chairperson, and Deputy Minister, and honorable members and my colleagues. Chair, with regards to the issue of television license fee, I think we published a draft white paper on audiovisual content services in October. The closing date is 15 February. In there, Chair, there are various issues that have been raised. One of them relates to how we need to review the television license fee section to broaden its definition, collection system for television license, and to strengthen enforcement mechanisms and penalties of non-payment. So over the last 2 months, we've been engaging with the sector, explaining the matter. And I think the sector has acceded and agrees that nowhere in the policy is the department saying that it is going to charge people with mobile devices and that the money will go to the SABC. The same question, I think, came from Honorable Member Mr. Mike Waters to the Minister. We provided the answer on the 4th of January. So, Chair, I wanted to reassure the Honorable Member that the debate is around the larger television license fee, but there is no way we do not mention Netflix or any other OTT service in name that we are going to charge them and that the money will go to the SABC. Chair, there's no policy position like that from government. But what we have said, Chair, is that we will await all the submissions on the 15th because this is an open discussion. And based on the submissions that we get, I think we will finalize our white paper on audiovisual content services for South Africa. Thanks, Chair.
To continue, Chair, with your permission, in terms of the other questions, with regards to the unbundling of the Post Bank and from the Post Office, our intent is that it will still remain within the department, under the department's entity, as one of the department's entity. And then we, as I indicated, that we're hoping that we will be able to table or introduce the bill to Parliament middle of this year. We will also, Chair, as Honorable Ngwenya requested, provide the committee with the list of all the bills that we intend on tabling, and we really appreciate this invitation because then it will help to give sight of those bills that are coming. And these obviously include the Digital Development Challenge Fund and the Post Bank. And we also have two state infrastructure and service bills that would also bring to Parliament. Chair, on the queues, Honorable Nanas is concerned. Equally, Chair, yes, we have seen an influx at the post offices or at the pay points. Chair, we identified 833 or 34 pay points that obviously have received high influx as is normal, as compared to the normal payout. And this was obviously due to the fact that there was this additional grant that was being paid. Chair, the challenges there have been that the marshals that have been deployed, and certainly there are marshals, but they were actually coming from partners as well as the community organizations. They do not have the ability and the capacity to manage those queues, Chair. We've tried in terms of intervention to see if we cannot deploy between ourselves as well as the Department of Social Development. We are still exploring means and ways, Chair, of how to mitigate this. We certainly do need additional marshals at these pay points. And as such, we're engaging the National Treasury to assist us in terms of availing further funding for us then to employ youth who would then act as marshals in these pay points. We've also written to the South African Police to also ask them to assist in as far as the deployment of at least the police or the community police people to assist in the queues. It is a crisis even today, as we also then kickstart. We are observing this situation with the post office and we are receiving the daily reports. So it is a serious concern for us. Chair, though, I think I'm going to ask my colleague to talk about the scope of the Post Bank, and also additionally to unpack the issues related to the business model. Honorable Claude asked about the acronym IGF. The establishment of the IGF in slide 12, it's talking to the Internet Governance Forum. The Internet Governance Forum is part of the WSIS outcome. At a global level, there is a global IGF. They convene meetings annually. And then we also have regional and sub-regional IGF, both at a continental level and under the Southern African Development Community. And each country was also tasked to establish an IGF, which is a multi-stakeholder forum that will look at issues related to the internet, as well as facilitating an inclusive information society. So that is what it means. On the WARN, Chair, lastly, again, as I indicated earlier, our policy intent that the minister and the deputy minister have given, and the mandate which were given, was to seek to transform the society. And the WARN, in terms of its principles and objectives, Chair, was that it must at least be 70% owned by South Africans and must comply with the empowerment requirements, which I spoke to earlier. It must include a diversity of ownership and ensure meaningful participation of all entities, including SMMEs, as well as the targeted group, which I also mentioned, which is women, youth, and persons with disability. We also had requested that when it is licensed, because certainly the consortium or the group of people who are going to invest in this, it's not monies that is readily available. So we must make sure that the WARN is viable and sustainable. And on that basis, according to the CSIR recommendation, our policy direction had then recommended at least 20% market share. And also then it must have access in terms of the facilities and network infrastructure, because we know that once you've already spent a lot of money investing in this, you will not have money readily available to build your own infrastructure. We are encouraging, therefore, that there should then be the facilities and open access network for the WARN, in line with both our policy directive, as well as now also then the rapid deployment guidelines, or the policy that we would be issuing. And we're hoping then that with the introduction of the WARN, there would then be promoting competition, and as a result of which we would see a reduction in cost. Chair, I think I've answered most of the questions. I'm just going to ask my colleague just quickly then to speak further on the Post Bank. Mr. Moses Mchene is on the line.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon to Minister, fellow committee members and colleagues. Currently, the Post Bank, as it's operating now, it's operating as a deposit-taking institution, and it's not currently having the banking license. And also, as all of us now are aware, that the Post Bank has applied for the license with the view that it wants to broaden its offerings to the public and offer full suites in relation to the business of the bank. The issues that relates to the banking license that then came to the fore was the current Post Bank Act, as so far as it relates to the ownership. It then has a clause that indicated that once Post Bank has been incorporated,
SAPO shall be the sole owner and shareholder of the bank. However, given the requirements, the stringent requirement from the SAP in relation to, from the Reserve Bank in relation to how the bank controlling companies are constituted. One of the requirements that is there on Section 44 of the Banks Act is that any institution that wants to exercise control over the bank has to be in a financially sound position. And as we are aware, SAPO is not currently in that state where it would be able to recapitalize and support the bank should it run into financial difficulty. Therefore, it would not meet that stringent requirement. It therefore then meant that the Act has to be amended such that there has to be an institution that would be able to offer the role of the bank controlling company. That's then culminated into the Post-Bank Amendment Act, which therefore would make provision for the creation of the new bank controlling company that would actually then take responsibility of exercising control over the bank. That bank controlling company, as the acting DG has already alluded to, it will actually report to the department, and the sole shareholder would be minister on behalf of government. That process has already commenced and the amendments have been finalized and currently are serving in cabinet as we speak. The idea is to introduce it in the half part of the year so that it can be concluded. And once that process has been concluded, we would then be left with one area that we have to fulfill such that we complete the banking license application. That process would be to submit the Section 43 application, which is the registration of a bank controlling company that we would have established to look after the affairs of the bank. So insofar as the completion of the banking license, once that the Section 43 has been lodged, the application for the bank would be complete and the SAP will be in a position to adjudicate on the banking license. Currently, the application is there, but there are outstanding matters that the regulator has given us the opportunity to resolve. One of those is to amend the Act and such that we are able then to submit the last portion of the application that is outstanding, which is the Section 43. From there, then the Reserve Bank would be able to adjudicate on the license. And we are hoping that by the end of this year, if all goes according to plan, we would have completed that process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I hope we've responded to the questions.
Okay, thank you very much. No, before I can check with members if there is any follow-up, can I check with DM if there is anything you want to say? DM? Okay.
Chairperson, Honourable Klute.
Yes, Honourable Klute.
Sorry, I found that there were some of my questions that weren't answered, but for the sake of time, I'm willing to email the questions I found not to be answered, and I'll send it, if it's possible, to have them answered then from the department.
Okay. Yes, I also wanted to check with the Secretariat so that the Secretary can then compare with the DG in terms of areas where they might not have responded to questions. they must compare their questions and responses and then put them in writing back to us. I think that will be fair enough, because Honorable Nana was also asking whether the issue of hate speech and what has been responded to. DG, is that able to cover us and yourself?
Yes, Chair, we would be happy to respond. I think maybe what we did was then we did the general response, but DDG Kadebe did also speak on the hate speech. One is that under the COVID, we have established a committee to address the issues related to hate speech, but then also then on the bigger scheme is that we're working with the information regulator related to the issues of the protection of personal data, but also to address then the information that is online.
No, that's fine. I wanted to check. You will liaise with our secretary of the committee and check areas where issues were not well responded to, and then put them in writing. That
Yes,
is what I
please.
was. Okay. No, that's
Thank
fine.
you, Honorable Chair. Thank you.
I'm just checking DM because I want
Chairman.
Honorable Nana.
Chairman, thanks, man, and I'm sorry for prolonging your meeting. Chair, it is not to suggest that I wasn't listening to the responses. You will note that I have been writing in our group that my bandwidth is terribly unstable for the past 2-3 days.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I kept on being kicked out, so I must have missed some of the replies.
All right. No,
But what I wanted to say, Chair, is on the issue of the post office and the long queues, the queue marshals. Quite frankly, where I live, and back home in Alice, I haven't seen those queue marshals. I may have missed them. So, on my part, Chair, the department can expect photographs of me conducting oversight in some of these post offices, showing that indeed there are no queue marshals, because I'm pretty sure that there are no queue marshals in the post offices I've visited. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay. No, that's fine. I was just checking if DM is still in the meeting. I wanted
Hi,
to
Chair. Sorry, this is Zandile from DM's office. We seem to be experiencing some network challenges. Even her cell phone has just completely been shut down. So we might just struggle to log back in.
Okay. No, that's fine. As long as the DG is here. Thank you very much. Honorable Ngwenya, you wanted to say something?
Thanks, Chairperson. I think my question have been answered. Nothing I wanted to add. Thanks.
All right. No, thank you very much. DG, thank you very much for the responses. Like we said, if there are any other issues that you have not captured, you liaise with our secretary of the committee just to check those. You can then respond to us in writing so that we can be able to favor honorable members with those responses. We want to take this opportunity to thank you for being available to our committee. You might have heard that out of the key issues raised was the issue of the coordination of a webinar on the 5G and spectrum, which the minister needs to coordinate for us. We'll liaise with your office, where we can have Ikasa and Professor Marwala on that. And that members have raised that this policy must be an equalizer between the haves and the have-nots, and that we must also prioritize infrastructure in rural area, and the issue of the reduction of the cost, and also that we should not perpetuate the digital divide. The last issue is the post office queues, that they are becoming super spreaders of COVID. And I think it's one area that you need to check the way the queues are. They are posing a serious danger to our communities. So we want to thank you very much, DG and your team, and I think we can then release you from our meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the honorable members. May you all have a blessed evening. Please continue to keep safe. And Chair, we will certainly look into these matters and also respond in writing to the other questions. And certainly, we are also equally concerned on the queues at the pay points in the post offices. It is a serious matter for us. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, honorable members. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairperson. Thank you.
Are we staying behind, Chair?
Yeah, no. I must first check with my secretary whether she's releasing us.
Okay. Noted.
You have got a lot of authority, Secretary. You can say we stay, or you are releasing us.
And that's too much responsibility for my first meeting, Chair. Chair, at present, I don't actually have any minutes in front of me. Okay. So maybe if we can keep that for the next meeting. But I think we've concluded the business for the day. So from my side, there's nothing else, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to check whether we still have minutes or any other thing. Thank you very much, honorable members, and thanks, Secretary, in your first meeting in our committee. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. You will make follow-up on those issues that we have been raised by members, and then we'll then look at them in our next meetings and engagements. Thank you very much, honorable members, and good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Nana.
Thank you, Chairperson, and I would like to wish for Loli the speedily covering in the name of Jesus. Apole.
Yeah, no, she will recover.
Amen. Agreed.
Amen.
She will recover.
Chocolate.